France is one of the few countries that can sell the same thing in completely different forms. A bottle of perfume, a handbag, a nuclear reactor, a bottle of wine, a fashion show, a fighter jet, a museum ticket, a Michelin restaurant, a luxury hotel, a political idea about Europe. On the surface, these things do not look connected, but in France, they are part of the same national machine. France understood something most countries never fully master. Power is not only about producing things people need, it is also about defining what people want. That is why France still matters so much. It is not the biggest economy in the world. It is not the strongest military power. It is not the center of global software. It is not the factory of the planet. But France sits in a rare position. It shapes taste. And taste is expensive. When people think of luxury, they think of Paris. When they think of fashion, they think of Paris. When they think of wine, perfume, fine dining, art, romance, museums, old streets, and beautiful hotels, France is already inside their imagination. That is not an accident. France turned culture into an export industry. The country does not only sell products, it sells the feeling that a product belongs to a higher world. A bag is not just leather. A perfume is not just a smell. Champagne is not just alcohol. A hotel in Paris is not just a room. A French restaurant is not just food. France is selling status through beauty. That is why companies like LVMH matter so much. LVMH is not simply a business group with famous brands. It is a symbol of how France converted heritage into money. Louis Vuitton, Dior, Moët and Chandon, Hennessy, Givenchy, Fendi, Bulgari, Sephora, these names do not survive only because the products are useful. They survive because people attach meaning to them. Luxury works when the beer feels that the object says something about who they are. France mastered that psychology. This is one of the most powerful economic tricks in the world. If you sell a normal bag, you compete on price, material, and function. If you sell a luxury bag, you compete on desire, scarcity, history, and identity. The physical object matters, but the story around it matters even more. France has centuries of story: kings, palaces, artists, writers, revolution. Cafes, cathedrals, couture, cinema, wine regions, museums, philosophers, and fashion houses all feed the same image. Modern France can turn old France into a premium product that is extremely hard to copy. A new country can build a mall, it can build a hotel, it can hire designers, it can buy advertising. But it cannot instantly create the cultural depth of Paris, Versailles, Bordeaux, Burgundy, Chanel, Dior, the Louvre, and the French Riviera. France's advantage is time. The country inherited a civilization brand, then learned how to monetize it. Tourism proves this better than anything. France is still one of the most visited countries on Earth, with around 100 million international arrivals in recent years. People do not travel there only for one thing. They come for Paris, the Riviera, the Alps, Normandy, Provence, castles, wine, food, art, fashion, Disneyland Paris, beaches, villages, and the idea of France itself. That last part is important. People visit France partly because they already have France in their head before they arrive. The country is a global fantasy. Sometimes the real experience is messy, expensive, crowded, or disappointing. Paris can be dirty, service can feel cold. Strikes can disrupt travel, but the brand is so strong that people keep coming anyway. That is power. Most countries have to explain why tourists should care. France has spent centuries making people feel like they already know. But France is not just a museum with expensive handbags, it is also one of Europe's most serious strategic countries. It has nuclear weapons, a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, major defense companies, a global military presence, overseas territories, and one of the strongest diplomatic traditions in the world. France does not want to be seen as a medium-sized European country. It wants to be seen as a world power. That ambition is older than the modern republic. France has always had a strong idea of itself. It sees its language, culture, state, military, and diplomacy as part of a larger mission. Sometimes that creates confidence. Sometimes it creates arrogance. But it gives France a national style that is different from countries that only think in economic terms. France wants influence. The European Union is one of the main places where it tries to exercise that influence. Germany became Europe's industrial machine, but France became one of Europe's political brains. French leaders often talk about strategic autonomy, European sovereignty, and the need for Europe to act independently from both America and China. This is not just rhetoric. France understands that in a world of giant powers, Europe cannot survive only as a consumer market. It needs defense, energy, industry, technology, and political will. France pushes that idea because it knows Europe without power becomes dependent on other people's decisions. That is why France keeps investing in defense and nuclear energy. Nuclear power is one of the most important parts of the French model. France built one of the largest nuclear fleets in the world and still gets most of its electricity from nuclear plants. This gives the country a low-carbon electricity mix and a level of energy independence many European countries envy. After the European energy crisis, this mattered even more. Germany had moved away from nuclear and became heavily exposed to gas problems. France had its own nuclear maintenance issues, but the basic strategy remained clear. A country with nuclear power is less vulnerable to imported fossil fuels than a country that depends too much on gas. For France, nuclear energy is not only about electricity, it is about sovereignty. The same logic applies to defense. France has companies like Dassault, Thales, Safran, and Naval Group. It produces fighter jets, missiles, satellites, submarines, radars, and military systems. The Rafale fighter jet became one of the clearest examples of France's ability to sell advanced defense technology abroad. This is another side of French power that does not fit the tourist postcard behind the cafes and fashion shows. France is a serious military-industrial country. That combination is what makes France interesting. It can sell perfume and fighter jets. It can host Fashion Week and argue about nuclear deterrence. It can attract tourists with romance while maintaining one of the most independent foreign policies in the West. France is soft power and hard power in the same package. But the French model has problems. The first problem is that France is expensive to run. The country has a large welfare state, strong public services, pensions, health care, education, labor protections, and a political culture where citizens expect the state to play a major role. This creates social stability and quality of life, but it also creates high spending and constant tension over taxes, debt, and reform. France is famous for protests because French citizens do not treat politics like background noise. When the government tries to change pensions, labor rules, or public services, people take to the streets. To outsiders, this can look chaotic. But inside France, protest is part of the political culture. The French state is powerful, but French society pushes back hard. That makes reform difficult. A president can have big plans, but the country is not easy to move. France likes ambition, but it does not like being forced too quickly. This is one reason France often feels stuck between greatness and frustration. It has talent, infrastructure, culture, companies, and global influence, but it also has bureaucracy, political anger, high debt, and slow reforms. The second problem is inequality between the image of France and the reality of life in France. The world sees Paris, luxury brands, and Michelin restaurants. Many French people see housing pressure, wage concerns, immigration debates, rural decline, public service problems, security worries, and political polarization. The luxury image is real, but it does not represent the daily life of everyone in the country. That contrast can become explosive when a country sells elegance to the world while many citizens feel economically squeezed, resentment grows. The Yellow Vest movement showed how deep that frustration can become. It was not only about fuel taxes. It was about people outside the glamorous version of France feeling ignored by the political and economic center. This is the hidden weakness of a country with a beautiful brand. The brand can become disconnected from the people living underneath it. The third problem is France's post-imperial role. Like Britain, France lost most of its empire, but it kept influence through language, military ties, business networks, diplomacy, and currency systems in parts of Africa. This legacy is complicated and increasingly contested. Many African countries are pushing back against old French influence, especially in the Sahel, where anti-French sentiment has grown. For decades, France saw itself as a major player in Africa. Now that role is under pressure from local politics, Russian influence, Chinese investment, and a younger generation that does not want old colonial relationships repackaged as partnership. This matters because France's global identity depends partly on having reach beyond Europe. If that reach shrinks, France has to rethink what kind of world power it can be. The fourth problem is competition. Luxury is strong, but China, America, Italy, South Korea, and the Gulf are all trying to shape taste in different ways. Tourism is strong, but over-tourism and high prices can damage experience. Nuclear power is strategic, but reactors are expensive and politically controversial. Europe is important, but the EU is slow and divided. France has many cards, but none of them are automatic wins still. Writing France off would be a mistake. The country has a rare mix of assets, culture, geography, food, fashion, agriculture, energy, military power, diplomacy, tourism, universities, infrastructure, luxury brands, and a strong national identity. Many countries have one or two of these. France has several layers at once. That is why it keeps surviving crises. France can disappoint people politically and still attract them culturally. It can struggle economically and still sell premium products. It can be criticized abroad and still remain central to Europe. It can look old-fashioned and still produce global companies. Its deepest power is not one industry. It is the ability to turn identity into value. A French product often carries more than its function. A French wine carries land, tradition, and status. A French fashion house carries Paris. A French meal carries ritual. A French museum carries civilization. A French nuclear plant carries sovereignty. A French fighter jet carries independence. That is the pattern. France makes things feel bigger than themselves. This is why the country has remained influential even as the world changed. The American model sells scale and technology. The German model sells engineering reliability. The Saudi model sells oil money turning into future ambition. The French model sells meaning. And meaning can be extremely profitable. Luxury buyers are not paying only for material. Tourists are not paying only for transportation. Students are not paying only for classes. Governments buying French defense systems are not paying only for hardware. They are also buying association, trust, prestige, autonomy, or identity. France understands this instinctively, but the future will test whether that is enough. If France wants to stay powerful, it cannot rely only on old beauty. It needs industrial renewal, digital strength, energy stability, social cohesion, and a political system that can actually make decisions. A country can have the world's best brand and still weaken if the foundations crack. That is the French challenge. Paris can still sell the dream. LVMH can still sell desire. The Riviera can still sell luxury. The Louvre can still sell history. French nuclear power can still support sovereignty. French diplomacy can still shape Europe, but France must prove that it can remain not only admired, but functional, because admiration is not the same as strength. A country can be loved by tourists and doubted by investors. It can be respected culturally and divided politically. It can have luxury streets in Paris and angry voters outside the capital. France lives inside that contradiction every day. That is what makes it such a strong story. France is not just a rich European country with good food and old buildings. It is a country that turned beauty into power, culture into money, energy into sovereignty, and history into a global brand. The world visits France for romance. The rich buy France for status. Europe needs France for politics and defense. And France needs all of that to keep proving that its old idea of greatness still works in the modern world. That is the real question. Can a country built on taste, state power, and national identity keep shaping the future when the world is moving towards software, speed, and scale? France believes the answer is yes. And for now, the world still pays to believe in France.